Welcome the anointed ones. When God puts his hand on you, even your enemies start fighting each other just to figure out why their plans keep collapsing. That's not superstition. That's not coincidence. That's spiritual physics in real time. Before we go any deeper, here's a documented psychological fact. When a group shares a common target, and that target becomes untouchable, the group turns inward and begins attacking itself. It's called displaced aggression, and trust me, you're watching a full-blown episode play out in your honor. Because whether you realize it or not, your life has become the plot twist they never prepared for. The same people who partnered up to deal with you are suddenly dealing with each other, and none of them can explain why the war they started isn't touching you, but is tearing their alliances apart like wet paper. Your name has become a volcano in their conversations. Your resilience has become a thorn they can't pull out. Your protection has become an equation they can't solve. And now they're arguing, panicking, accusing, and side-eyeing each other like contestants on a show called Who Ruined the Plot to Destroy the Chosen One? Spoiler alert, the answer is all of them. See, what they didn't understand is that your life is not open territory. You're not spiritually unclaimed. Heaven has your GPS locked so tightly that even the boldest enemies can't take a step toward you without tripping over their own schemes. You are the kind of person God defends before you even know there was something to defend you from. And that's why the chaos is erupting in their camp, not yours. Their circle is combusting because the battle they organized against you never had legal access to your destiny. They don't know how to process divine immunity, so instead of accepting that you're untouchable, they're blaming each other for every failed attempt. They're treating misfortune like leaked information. They're treating consequences like betrayal. They're treating divine protection like sabotage. And you're just over there glowing, growing, minding your business, and wondering why the very people who were once united in mess suddenly can't stand to breathe the same air. That's what happens when someone tries to touch a chosen one whose assignment is still in motion. The plot collapses, the alliance shatters, and the attackers turn on themselves trying to figure out what supernatural force is blocking them. Here's the truth. God won't let them touch you, so they're touching each other instead. Sit back. Watch the unraveling. Your story is protected, and their confusion is just the opening scene. Number 1. Your presence exposes every hidden alliance that was built against you. People don't realize how much their intentions leak when they're standing in the presence of someone who carries truth. You don't have to confront them. You don't have to call anyone out. You don't even have to raise your voice. Your spirit does the revealing before you say a single word. That's why the people who quietly group together behind your back are suddenly at each other's throats. Your elevation exposed the weakness of their connection. The alliances formed against you were never real. They were stitched together with gossip, insecurity, and a shared desire to see you fail. That kind of bond doesn't survive honesty, growth, or divine favor. The moment your life started moving forward, faster, smoother, and higher, the cracks in their unity started to widen. Each person suddenly had something different to say. Their versions didn't match anymore. Their stories stopped aligning, and the very mouth that once defended someone in the group is now the same mouth dragging them through the dirt. Your presence activated this unraveling because people can't fake loyalty in front of someone who carries spiritual clarity. When you walk into a room, the truth in you pulls the masks off everyone who tried to stand together simply because they had a common enemy. They weren't friends. They were co-workers in negativity. And the moment the project failed, meaning you didn't break, the team dissolved. Now they're arguing over who said what. They're blaming each other for why nothing worked. They're accusing each other of being careless, talking too much, or doing too little. And at the root of all that chaos is the fact that your protection exposed them. Your growth revealed how weak their intentions were. Your resilience forced them to look at each other and see the envy they pretended didn't exist. They thought you would crumble under the weight of their collaboration. Instead, their collaboration crumbled under the weight of your calling. You didn't destroy their alliance. Your authenticity did, and that's exactly why they're fighting now. God let your presence shine just enough to show who they truly were to each other. Number 2, they are fighting because your spirit removes their ability to lie consistently. People who lie about you forget one thing. Lies require constant maintenance. They require rehearsal. They require agreement. They require the same story being repeated the same way by the same people every single time. And that's where their downfall begins, because your spirit carries too much truth for their false narratives to stay stable. The moment you show up, or even the moment your name comes up, their stories begin to crumble under their own weight. Your presence creates an atmosphere where truth becomes louder than their intentions. They start slipping. One person says you did this, another says you did that, and suddenly their lies don't match anymore. They don't know that they're being spiritually exposed. All they feel is the pressure to explain themselves. And because they weren't telling the truth to begin with, every explanation becomes another crack in their version of the story. This inconsistency is exactly why they're turning on each other now. One person is accusing the other of exaggerating, another is claiming someone added details that were never discussed. Someone else is blaming the whole mess on the wrong person in the group. What started out as a united front is now a circle full of defensive people, all trying to avoid being the one caught lying. Your spirit is the trigger behind this unraveling. People underestimate the effect a chosen one has on dishonesty. You carry a type of clarity that doesn't ask questions, it just reveals. You don't expose them with your words, you expose them with your existence. And that makes liars uncomfortable. It forces their mouths to move faster than their minds, and eventually they contradict themselves without even realizing it. They can't lie smoothly in your presence because truth agitates anything false. Their tongues get heavy. Their excuses fall apart. Their rehearsed lines lose their timing. Before long, they're accusing each other of ruining the plan, sabotaging the lies, and messing up the narrative. They're not fighting because of something you did. They're fighting because their lies can't survive around someone who carries divine authenticity. Number 3. God is using their division as proof that your battle was never a fair one. One thing people don't like to admit is how much backup they needed just to stand against one person, you. They formed groups, whispered in corners, created narratives, and convinced each other that you were the problem. But now that everything is falling apart, their division is exposing the truth they tried so hard to hide. It was never a fair fight. They needed numbers because they knew they couldn't face you alone. Their unity was their only strength. Take that away, and they have nothing left but their individual intentions. And those intentions were never brave enough to confront you directly. They preferred to merge their insecurities together and wrap them up as confidence. But the moment God began separating them, their false courage evaporated. Each person suddenly feels naked without the support of the others, because the only thing that gave them power was the crowd they hid behind. This is the divine proof that you weren't battling equals. You were dealing with people who needed a whole committee to oppose one soul. They weren't strong. They were synchronized, and that synchronization had an expiration date, because anything built on fear and jealousy cannot survive divine timing. Now they're arguing over who started what. They're pointing fingers over who escalated things. They're exposing conversations that were supposed to stay secret. The same mouths that once spoke confidently against you are now speaking fearfully about each other. Their circle has turned into a confession booth, and they don't even realize heaven set it up that way. God is using their collapse as evidence. Evidence that you never needed revenge. Evidence that their unity was fraudulent. Evidence that your strength didn't come from popularity, but from protection. Their division is a testimony that heaven stepped in, not to hurt them, but to reveal the truth they hid. It took all of them together to try to break one chosen person, and even then, they still failed. Their conflict is the receipt that your battle was never equal. God is letting the whole thing unravel so the world can see what you were really up against and why you overcame it. Number 4. Your protection is so strong that their attempts ricochet back onto each other. There's a level of divine covering that doesn't just block harm, it redirects it, not out of cruelty, not out of vengeance, but out of spiritual law. When someone sends out negativity, plots, or energy meant to break a chosen one, it travels with intention, and when it can't penetrate the shield around you, it doesn't just vanish. It returns to wherever it came from. That's how their own attempts end up colliding with each other, creating conflicts they can't trace or explain. Your protection works like a spiritual boundary. Anything that doesn't match the frequency of your purpose gets bounced back. And because they were all participating in the same attempt, whether through gossip, manipulation, envy, or silent agreement, they're now getting hit with the very chaos they crafted. They carved daggers with your name on them, but they didn't realize those daggers were boomerangs. Now each person is dealing with consequences that feel strangely familiar, because they are. This is why they're turning on each other. They don't know where the sudden tension is coming from, but they feel it. They don't understand why one small disagreement becomes a full-blown eruption. They don't understand why trust has evaporated so quickly. It's because the spiritual weapons they produced had no valid destination. You were off limits. When something can't complete its assignment, it returns confused, chaotic, and doubled in force. That energy spreads through the group like wildfire, and suddenly every hidden resentment becomes a loud one. They're being confronted by their own intentions. One person's bitterness is bouncing onto another. Someone's jealousy is ricocheting into someone else's insecurity. Their group is collapsing because the energy they released has nowhere to go except back into the hands that shaped it. And the more they try to blame you, the heavier their consequences become, because heaven knows exactly where the original seeds were planted. Your protection isn't just a shield, it's a mirror. Whatever they send out reflects right back, and they're now dealing with the reflection of their own actions. That's why their circle is crumbling. They didn't expect their warfare to boomerang. They didn't expect divine immunity. And they definitely didn't expect their own hands to be the ones getting cut. Number 5. They're realizing too late that you weren't the threat, your covenant was. People often think they're fighting a human being, but when it comes to a chosen one, they're dealing with something far greater than flesh and personality. They had no idea that beneath your quietness, your humility, your resilience, there was a covenant, an unbreakable agreement between you and God that protects you, guides you, and defends you. They aimed their attacks at you, but what they actually hit was the force backing you. And now the backlash they're facing feels disproportionate because they weren't fighting a person. They were colliding with a divine assignment. They underestimated the spiritual weight you carry. They thought they were dealing with just you, someone they assumed would fold under pressure or stay silent under manipulation. They didn't know your life had a blueprint written long before they even entered the story. So when they pushed, plotted, or spoke against you, they unknowingly crossed lines that heaven had drawn. That's why nothing they did landed the way they expected. That's why every attempt turned into a disaster they can't explain. They walked into something sacred with dirty hands, and now they're seeing the consequences unfold in ways they never imagined. What's happening now, the arguments, the blame, the fear, is the aftermath of realizing they provoked something they weren't prepared for. They're confused because the consequences feel too intense for the actions they thought were small. But that's exactly what happens when people treat a chosen one like ordinary. They misjudge the spiritual boundaries around your life, and then they're shocked when every attack rebounds with a force they can't escape. Their panic comes from understanding, suddenly and painfully, that nothing about this situation was equal. You weren't protected because you were perfect. You were protected because of purpose. You weren't elevated because you tried harder. You were elevated because you were assigned to. And now they're facing the reality that they weren't fighting an individual. They were resisting destiny. It's too late for them to undo what they activated. They've already learned the most humbling truth. You weren't the threat. Your covenant was, and still is, untouchable. Number 6. Their guilt is morphing into aggression toward each other. When people know deep down that they crossed a line, but they don't want to face that truth, the guilt doesn't disappear. It mutates. That's exactly what's happening in their circle. They all participated in tearing you down, whether through silent agreement, rumors, manipulation, or standing by while others attacked you. But now that the consequences are rolling in, nobody wants to be the one holding the responsibility. Nobody wants to admit they targeted someone who never deserved it. Nobody wants to say out loud that they were wrong. So instead of confessing, they're turning on each other. Their guilt is too heavy to sit quietly inside them, so it's spilling out as anger. One person feels guilty but won't say it, so they snap at someone else. Another person knows they took things too far, so they point fingers instead. Another feels shame creeping up on them, so they raise their voice, hoping noise will drown out accountability. And suddenly, the group that once agreed on everything is arguing over every small detail. Every interaction becomes a confrontation. Every conversation becomes a battlefield. This aggression isn't about you. It's about them trying to escape their own conscience. It's easier for them to blame each other than to admit they joined forces against someone who did nothing to them. They're using each other as shields because none of them want to be the one who stands alone and says, "I was part of this." They'd rather fight among themselves than face the truth of the role they played. The reason their arguments feel so intense is because shame is a fire that burns from the inside out. Each person is trying to divert that burn onto someone else. They attack each other because the alternative is admitting they attacked the wrong person. They lash out because silence forces them to sit with their guilt. They're angry because deep down they know they acted out of jealousy, insecurity, or fear. And now the weight of that realization is crushing their ego. Their aggression is not random, it's guilt in motion. And the more protected you are, the more exposed they feel. They can't undo what they did, so the only thing left is to throw blame around until someone else looks worse than they do. But guilt doesn't disappear. It just shows up in louder, uglier ways, this time through the chaos they're unleashing on each other. Number 7. They're fighting because you weren't supposed to survive, and your survival ruined their narrative. The truth they never speak out loud is this: they counted on your downfall. They built entire conversations, expectations, and secret predictions around the belief that you wouldn't make it. Your struggles were entertainment to them. Your silence was confirmation. Your hardships were treated like evidence that their assumptions about you were correct. In their minds, your story was already written: failure, collapse, and disappearance. That's the script they crafted and rehearsed together. But then something they didn't prepare for happened. You survived. Not just barely. You survived in a way that exposed the limits of their imagination. You came out stronger, clearer, wiser, and more grounded than anyone expected. That survival didn't just disrupt their plans, it destroyed the storyline they were banking on. And people don't handle disruption well, especially when it makes them look foolish. Now that the narrative they created can't stand, they're scrambling to figure out what went wrong. One person is accusing another of not doing enough. Someone else is angry because the signs were obvious and no one acted. Another is insisting that they misjudged you because others fed them the wrong information. Their unity is falling apart because your resilience made all of them look unreliable, irrational, or dishonest. Your survival didn't just save you, it destabilized every lie they told, every rumor they spread, every exaggeration they cooked up, and every expectation they quietly celebrated. They invested in your collapse, and now they have to sit with the embarrassment of being wrong. And instead of admitting that they miscalculated your strength, they're redirecting that embarrassment toward each other. Your elevation rearranged the cast of the story they wrote for your life. The villain they assigned you became irrelevant. The victims they pretended to be don't fit the plot anymore. The experts who swore you'd never rise have nothing to stand on. The scripts they drafted no longer match the reality unfolding in front of them. So the only option left, the only way to avoid admitting they doubted someone chosen, is to blame each other for why the plot fell apart. They're fighting because your survival proved they were wrong about everything, and nothing bruises ego faster than watching the person they expected to fall walk into a season they never believed you'd reach. Number 8. God blocked them so completely that they now doubt each other's spiritual power. When people come together to work against someone, they depend heavily on the illusion that their influence, their connections, or their so-called spiritual strength will guarantee results. They truly believed whatever they tried against you would land. They thought their words held weight. They thought their intentions had authority. They believed their collective effort had enough power to shift something in your life. But they were up against a covering they didn't understand, and now the repeated failures are shaking the confidence they once had in themselves and each other. Every move they made collapsed. Every plot fizzled out. Every prediction they spoke over your life aged like spoiled milk. And instead of realizing that God was blocking them, they're starting to question the strength of their own influence. Someone in their circle is being blamed for not being powerful enough. Another is accused of not trying hard enough. Someone else is being silently judged because it used to work when they did it. Their unity is now buried under doubt, suspicion, and frustration. They don't understand that your protection isn't luck, coincidence, or timing. It has nothing to do with who prayed harder or who resisted better. Your life is under divine jurisdiction, meaning heaven decides what touches you and what doesn't. They weren't fighting your character, they were colliding with your calling. No spiritual attack, no word curse, no jealousy-fueled move can penetrate a life that God has sealed for purpose. But instead of acknowledging that reality, they're blaming each other for the failures. Why didn't it work? Isn't a question anymore, it's an accusation. Someone's being accused of being weak. Someone else is accused of messing up the plan. They're losing faith in each other because they never had spiritual authority to begin with. What they had was ego disguised as influence. Now the group is filled with people quietly doubting their own abilities, questioning their relevance, and feeling exposed. Their confidence wasn't destroyed by you, it was destroyed by the force protecting you. They aimed at a chosen one and discovered their power wasn't power at all. It was noise. And when noise meets divine covering, it goes silent fast. Number 9. Your calmness is interpreted as evidence that someone in their circle betrayed them. When people expect chaos from you and get calmness instead, it shakes them in a way they can't hide. They anticipated a reaction: anger, fear, frustration, emotional breakdown, something loud enough to confirm that their actions had impact. But your peace ruined their expectations. Your steady spirit, your unbothered energy, your refusal to collapse has turned into the one thing they didn't prepare for: confusion. And when confused people can't explain what's happening, they start inventing explanations that point inward, not outward. Your calmness is so unsettling to them that they can't accept it as confidence or faith or resilience. They have to twist it into something suspicious. They're telling themselves someone in their group must be giving you information. They assume there's a leak. They assume their private conversations reached your ears. They assume their strategies were exposed by someone they once trusted. Your peace feels too precise, too stable, too knowing, and they can't handle that. So now the paranoia is spreading through their circle. One person is being watched more closely. Someone else is being questioned about who they've been talking to. Another is being accused of running their mouth. Their unity is breaking down because they believe someone is secretly on your side. And the more calm and composed you remain, the more intense their suspicion becomes. Your lack of reaction is triggering a reaction in them. They think your calmness is strategic. They think you know more than you do. They think you're aware of every detail of their plans, even though all you're actually doing is staying focused on your path. Their guilt is telling them that someone must have exposed them, because how else could you be this unshaken? This is how spiritually misaligned people think. If they were in your position, they'd be falling apart. So when you don't fall apart, they project betrayal onto their own group. They can't imagine that your peace comes from inner strength or divine protection. They assume it must come from insider information. Your calmness is cracking their alliances because it highlights the weakness of their bond. If they trusted each other, they wouldn't be this paranoid. But your stability is showing them just how fragile their unity always was. And now they're tearing each other apart, trying to find a traitor who doesn't even exist. Your peace did that. Number 10. You exposed their weakest link without saying a word. What's wild is that you didn't have to confront them, clap back, or wage any kind of war. The moment God lifted you, even slightly, their circle self-destructed in real time. Elevation is a spiritual pressure test, and the weakest link will always be the first to burst. That insecure one in their group, the one who always secretly envied you, the one who smiled at you but choked on your name when you weren't around, they were the first to malfunction. Not because of what you said, not because of what you did, but because of what you survived. Your breakthrough created a psychological earthquake inside their camp. Suddenly, everything they thought they knew about you collapsed, and that collapse exposed tensions that had been sitting quietly under the surface for years. The jealous one couldn't contain themselves anymore. Their ego cracked. Their mouth started running. Their emotions glitched. They started leaking information, first subtle hints, then bigger confessions, then full-blown rants. And they didn't realize their outbursts were revealing the entire infrastructure of the group's intentions against you. Their circle is sinking now, not because of your retaliation, but because their weakest link couldn't survive the pressure of your resilience. You didn't expose them. Their own jealousy did. You didn't unravel their alliance. Their insecurities did. You didn't destroy their unity. Your survival did. And here's the cosmic irony. They set traps for you, but the only person who fell into panic was one of their own. Now the whole group is in chaos trying to plug the leaks, silence the outbursts, and figure out what triggered the meltdown. But the truth is simple. Your elevation hit the one heart that wasn't strong enough to pretend anymore. Their weakest link gave them away. And all you did was live. Number 11. They are fighting because your spirit makes every hidden competition visible. Some people were able to hide their true feelings until you walked into the room. Your spirit is like a divine spotlight. It shines Nothing stays buried, nothing stays disguised, nothing stays comfortably shadowed when you show up. People who were secretly comparing themselves to you suddenly can't keep a straight face. Those who quietly envied you suddenly feel exposed, as if their inner world has been pulled out and placed on the table for everyone to see. Those who were competing with you behind closed doors suddenly start slipping, revealing their own insecurity without realizing it. It's not because you're doing anything. It's because your spirit is too loud for their masks to stay intact. When someone carries genuine divine light, everyone around them becomes spiritually transparent. Pretenders start glitching. Hidden rivals become visibly uncomfortable. People with concealed resentment begin projecting it unconsciously. Your presence forces people to reveal themselves, whether they want to or not. This is why they're fighting. Your spirit didn't just enter their atmosphere, it exposed it. Your presence illuminated conversations that were previously whispered. It amplified jealousy that was quietly simmering under the surface. It magnified hidden competition they thought they were disguising with fake smiles and polite tones. You didn't call it out, your anointing did. You didn't confront anybody, your light did. You didn't accuse them, their own shadow responded to you. Because when divine energy walks into a room, everything counterfeit panics, everything insecure reacts, everything that isn't genuine begins to shake. Your presence becomes the mirror they can't escape. So now their group is in conflict, not because you said anything, but because you made their unspoken tension impossible to hide. They couldn't conceal the comparisons anymore. They couldn't cover up the internal bitterness. They couldn't pretend their competition was harmless. You forced them to face themselves without even trying. And people at war with themselves will always eventually end up at war with each other. Number 12, God made you untouchable. So he could reveal the true enemy among them. Your protection wasn't just about shielding you. It was also a divine strategy to expose everything that was hiding in the dark. They thought they were coming for you, but God had already placed a spiritual barrier around you that none of their intentions could penetrate. Their attacks didn't land, not because they weren't trying, but because heaven refused to authorize their access. What they didn't know was that their failure was part of the plan. God wasn't just protecting you, he was uncovering the truth among them. When someone is chosen, God doesn't just block what's harmful, he exposes what's hidden. The moment their plot fell apart, the tension among them rose. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know who said what, who told who pushed this, who benefited the most. Their unity was never real. Their loyalty was only strong when they believed they shared a common enemy. Once God removed you from their reach, they had to turn and face each other, and the truth they found wasn't pretty. Your untouchability became the catalyst for revelation. They didn't fail because you were weak. They failed because their own camp was contaminated. Their jealousy wasn't equal. Their intentions weren't aligned. Their motives weren't as pure as they pretended. And without the distraction of attacking you, they finally noticed the cracks between them. Cracks that were always there, but easier to ignore when they were busy targeting you. Now they're realizing someone in their circle was never trustworthy. Someone was stirring the pot. Someone was operating with hidden agendas. Someone was waiting for the plan to blow up so they could escape responsibility. God allowed the whole thing to collapse, just so the true enemy would step out of hiding. And now they're forced to admit what you already sensed. They were never safe with each other. Your divine protection didn't just save you, it revealed them. Their downfall is coming from within, not from you. And now they're learning the hard way that when God marks someone as untouchable, anyone who plots against that person ends up uncovering their own destruction. Number 13, your destiny activated, a level of consequence. They weren't built to handle. Your life carries a weight they underestimated. It's not the kind of weight you can see with your eyes. It's the spiritual intensity connected to your purpose. When someone is chosen, their destiny has a field of protection, accountability, and consequence surrounding it. Anyone who interferes with that field isn't just being messy or malicious. They're stepping into territory that carries a reaction they're not prepared for. And that's exactly what happened with the people who tried to come against you. They thought harming you was simple. They thought dragging your name, gossiping about you, or working behind your back would be just another petty decision with no ripple effect. But the moment they crossed the boundary of someone who carries divine assignment, they activated a kind of spiritual consequence that exceeds human intention. It wasn't about you fighting back. It wasn't about you clapping back. It wasn't about you exposing them. The consequence came automatically, because your destiny is not casual. It's governed. When the pressure hit them, they didn't understand where it came from. It came fast. It came heavy. It came with a precision that scared them. Instead of admitting they crossed a line they shouldn't have touched, they turned on each other. The fallout was too much for any of them individually, so they did what unprepared people do under pressure. They blamed the nearest person. Someone should have stopped it. Someone should have warned them. Someone should have handled it smarter. Someone should have backed out. But none of them want to admit they weren't built for the spiritual backlash that followed their actions, their arguments, their paranoia, their finger-pointing. It's all coming from the fact that they stepped into a storm that wasn't meant for them. They triggered something they didn't understand, something that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with divine order. The spiritual realm responded because destiny was touched. The pressure broke their unity, exposed their motives, and revealed their lack of spiritual capacity. Your calling didn't just protect you. It demanded accountability from anyone who tried to interfere with it. And now they're learning the hard way. Attacking a chosen one isn't a simple mistake. It's an invitation to consequences they can't withstand. Number 14. They're fighting because heaven is separating them before their next set of consequences hits. Their division isn't random and it isn't accidental. What looks like petty arguments, sudden fallouts, and unexpected tension is actually divine intervention at its finest. Heaven is stepping in and breaking their alliances apart piece by piece, not to punish them all at once, but to make sure they can never regroup with the same strength, the same confidence, or the same coordination ever again. God is removing their ability to operate as a unit, because He knows exactly what they're capable of when they think they have numbers on their side. When their plans against you were forming, they fed off each other's bitterness. Their unity was built on negativity, on jealousy, on insecurity, and on the illusion of collective power. But God saw that if they stayed together, they would try again. Maybe smarter, maybe quieter, maybe more manipulatively. So instead of giving them the space to strategize, heaven is dismantling everything they are depending on. One misunderstanding, one accusation, one eruption of ego at a time. Now they're arguing about details that don't matter. They're nitpicking each other's flaws. They're accusing each other of being sloppy, careless, or too emotional. They're replaying old conversations and dragging up old resentments. Their trust is collapsing, not because of what you did, but because heaven is removing every ounce of agreement that once fueled their attacks. God knows that unity in the wrong hands becomes weaponry. So He's breaking the weapon before it can be rebuilt. They think they're fighting about something recent, but the real reason is spiritual. Heaven refuses to let them stand together long enough to plan a repeat performance. Every disagreement is a wedge. Every outburst is a separation. Every cold shoulder is a divine barrier. God is isolating each one so that when the next wave of consequences arrives, they face it individually, not as a collective shielded by false loyalty. Their downfall is not coming from you. It's coming through the cracks heaven forced into their foundation. And while they scramble to figure out why the group feels cursed, you're watching God do exactly what he promised, ensuring that what once came against you can never rise as a united front again. There comes a moment in the life of every chosen one where the truth becomes undeniable. You were never fighting people. You were walking through a divine process that exposed what was never meant to stand beside you. Every conflict, every fallout, every sudden argument among those who came against you wasn't random drama. It was heaven rearranging the battlefield. The protection over your life was never passive. It was strategic, intelligent, and purposeful. While they were plotting in circles, God was working in dimensions they couldn't see. You didn't have to defend yourself. You didn't have to retaliate. You didn't have to prove your innocence, your value, or your strength. Your elevation spoke for you. Your peace confused them. Your resilience offended them. Your survival disrupted the script they wrote for you, and your destiny activated consequences they weren't equipped to absorb. Heaven allowed their alliances to break, their unity to crumble, and their loyalty to collapse, so that nothing formed against you could ever stabilize long enough to strike again. Every argument they are having now is tied to a divine truth. You were covered the entire time. God separated them before they could attempt another coordinated attack. God exposed what was hidden so you wouldn't carry the weight of misplaced guilt. God made your protection visible so they would understand the difference between touching a person and touching a purpose. You were never outnumbered. You were never unprotected. You were never vulnerable. Every setback became evidence. Every failed attack became revelation. Every new level of chaos in their camp became proof that your calling is not something to tamper with. Now their own hands are pointing at each other. Their own words are contradicting each other. Their own actions are dismantling what they once called unity. And here you are, untouched, elevated, wiser, and more spiritually fortified than ever. You survived what was meant to bury you, and in surviving, you exposed what was meant to stay hidden. That is the power of being chosen. If this message spoke to your spirit, family, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, drop a powerful comment, and share this video with someone who needs it. Your support keeps this truth moving, and it helps more chosen ones find the strength they didn't know they had. Stay blessed, stay protected, and stay tuned. Your story is still unfolding. God bless you.